for joining us today. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Lee Ji-yoon in Seoul. Coming up on today's edition of Business Daily. Samsung Electronics plans to increase shareholder returns and review its corporate structure as investors pile on pressure for greater reforms. Oil prices fell on Tuesday on doubts that OPEC countries will be able to reach a production cut deal. With that, we take a look at what impact cheap oil prices have had on the global economy and what we can expect from the upcoming OPEC meeting. And starting off with markets, Korean shares opened lower today, tracking overnight losses in Wall Street that took a breather from a recent rally. But following President Park Geun-hye's third televised address this afternoon, in which she says she would leave her fate up to the National Assembly, Korean shares rebounded to end 0.26 points higher on Wednesday. At the closing bell, the benchmark Kospi edged up to finish at 1978.39, while the tech-heavy Kosdaq also went up by 0.51% to end at 596.07. Meanwhile, the Korean won ended at 1,168.51 against the U.S. dollar. And business sentiment among Korean manufacturers remains sluggish in spite of slight improvements. The Bank of Korea's Business Survey Index of manufacturing firms for November came in at 72, up 1 point from the month before. A reading under 100 means pessimists outnumber optimists, and the slight uptick follows 3 straight months of stagnation since August. The central bank attributes the slight rise to an end of the auto industry strike and an improvement in the oil refining industry. The outlook for the coming month was the same as that from last month, signaling tight economic conditions. Korean tech giant Samsung Electronics has announced a roadmap for a set of changes aimed at increasing returns for its shareholders. Now, among its plans, Samsung will also consider shifting to a holding company structure. Our Kim Min-ji has the details.
Samsung Electronics has unveiled a package of measures aimed at improving the company's corporate structure as well as boosting shareholder value. In a statement Tuesday, Samsung said it will consider creating a holding company and weigh the benefits and feasibility of listing shares on international exchanges. It's the first time the tech giant has made such an announcement official.
Samsung is under pressure to enhance transparency, so it seems they will use the time to review their final decision. At the moment, it seems they want to shift to an intermediate financial holding company.
While this is not yet an option as a related bill is pending in Parliament, if passed, Samsung would not be required to separate its industrial and financial capital while reaping the benefits of a holding company structure. Experts say this would give heir apparent Lee Jae-yong room to further strengthen his grip within the group, which includes Samsung Electronics and insurance company Samsung Life. The announcement came after U.S. hedge fund Elliott Management, which holds a 0.62% stake in Samsung Electronics, had called on the firm to split into two, as well as pay a special dividend to remedy what it calls the company's inefficient capital structure. Among shareholder-friendly measures, Samsung said it will use half of its free cash flow for shareholder returns for this year and the next. That's the higher tier of the previous plan to return somewhere between 30 to 50% of its cash flow, which would translate into over $8 billion for this year. Samsung added it would also increase total dividends by 30% this year, bringing the annual amount to roughly $3.4 billion. The tech giant said it has taken steps to simplify its business to concentrate on core capabilities over the past several years and will continue to review opportunities to optimize long-term value and remain good stewards of capital. Kim Min-ji, Business Daily.
The Seoul city government recently announced stricter emission standards for vehicles starting next year, banning diesel-powered cars registered before 2005. Now, with this, some people have no choice but to buy new cars. But the lack of progress in passing a critical bill for car purchases is holding consumers back. Our Lee Ju-young has more.
When it comes to cars, Korea is no doubt a strong global player, and it's been rolling out more and more fuel-efficient vehicles by the year. But just take one look at the roads across the country, and they paint a vastly different picture. According to Korea Automobile Manufacturers Association, the number of cars registered at least 10 years ago surpassed the 7 million mark as of the first half of this year. That's about 3 million more compared to a decade ago, taking up nearly 33% of all registered vehicles. The scary part is just how fast they're growing. While the total number of automobiles increased by about 35% over the past decade, cars aged over 10 years more than doubled in the same time period. This not only leads to safety issues on the road, but is also considered one of the main culprits of Korea's fine dust problem. The government says in order to attract more people to swap out their aged vehicles for new cars, it has proposed a bill to cut as much as $1,200 in consumption tax. But it has yet to be passed, being put on hold for more than 4 months, particularly with the recent political scandal rocking the country. Industry officials say the support measure has big implications for both consumers and car makers, and that the bill needs to be passed as soon as possible to reduce confusion and give the market a nudge. Lee Ju-young, Business Daily.
Up until now, cheap oil meant many good things for Korea, which imports all of its oil. But that old formula doesn't seem to work anymore. With the global economy still struggling with low growth, the benefits of cheap oil for importers have been undercut by the losses of oil producers, further contributing to weak growth. In fact, earlier this year, the Bank of Korea said although low oil prices have helped improve terms of trade, there are now limitations to the positive effects it can have on corporate spending and domestic consumption. Now, the good news is that we have been seeing crude prices rise recently, and experts are hopeful that the global economy will benefit from this upward trend. So now all eyes are on a key OPEC meeting on Wednesday, as investors are still unsure on whether OPEC countries will be able to hammer out a deal to freeze or cut production.
Oil prices have been volatile in recent days ahead of a key OPEC meeting on Wednesday, where oil-producing countries will decide whether to cut production. Last week, prices of Brent, WTI, and Dubai crude all rose by an average $2 a barrel on the back of growing hopes for an OPEC deal. But investors are still skeptical about whether the oil cartel will be able to reach consensus in Vienna, as a tentative agreement had yielded no change in production patterns. If producers do reach a final deal, it'll help shore up prices. In fact, citing research from Goldman Sachs, Bloomberg says higher prices would encourage richer oil producers to pump more liquidity into the global financial system, which in turn may help boost the sluggish global economy. With cheap oil dealing a blow to investment in oil facilities and contributing to sagging prices, all eyes are now on OPEC talks and how it'll impact the future of oil.
And for more on this, Professor Yang Jun-suk from the Catholic University of Korea joins us in the studio today. Great to have you here.
Happy to be here.
All right, so even after the tentative agreement reached by OPEC nations back in September, we haven't seen much change in oil production. In fact, we have actually seen the supply increase. And of course, this has led to some skepticism over an oil deal by OPEC nations. So what are your thoughts on this?
Okay, well, until about Thursday, they seem to be working out at least some way to reduce or limit supply. But apparently that deal seemed to have fallen apart over the weekend. But there's apparently some news this morning that perhaps they're getting in line again.
Okay.
It was very surprising to me that the president of Russia, Putin, called president of Iran saying that they need to work this out. So that's been very unusual. But countries like Russia, Venezuela, they all need oil revenues to recover from their fiscal problems. And because of that, all of these countries want other countries to reduce production and raise prices, but not themselves. That's been the fundamental problems for the last 2 or 3 years. And I'm not sure if they can work the problem out. In fact, Saudi Arabia originally had planned meeting with non-OPEC members on Monday, and they just suddenly drew out of the meeting saying that they needed to work things out between OPEC members first.
Okay.
So my feeling is that either this meeting will not work out and they'll push it to the next meeting, or they'll have a very loose limit and supply. It'll be more symbolic than anything else. So I really don't see them making a solid decision, given all the country's economic conditions right now, making a solid decision to reduce output, given the problems right now.
All right, well, what impact is U.S. President-elect Donald Trump going to have on OPEC and oil prices once he comes into office in January? And also, what is Trump's view on oil?
Okay, well, he's saying a lot of things, some of it just contradictory. During the campaign, he said that the climate change has been a plot by China, so they don't need to worry about reducing carbon emissions, including oil.
Okay.
He's been promising, but he's apparently looking again at that point of view. He's saying that he will reconsider that point of view. He's been saying that he's going to get the U.S. out of the Paris Agreement on climate change, but he's also saying now that he's going to look again at that agreement. But he did promise pretty consistently that the U.S. Under his administration will get rid of regulations on oil development and coal development. So that probably means that the production of oil in the United States will go up. Now, United States exports very little oil, but because it takes so much of global imports, if U.S. increases its oil supply, that probably means that it'll contribute to the oil glut in the global economy, so it'll lower prices. So I think one of the things that the OPEC is considering is whether if they cut production and raise prices, it'll only give more opportunities for U.S. suppliers.
Now, I know prices have been kind of fluctuating, but recently it has been on a rising trend. But some are saying that U.S. shale could actually emerge as one of the factors that could slam the brakes on this trend.
Okay, well, the U.S. shale oil has been more resistant to price falls than people had expected. At the beginning of shale exploration, they were saying that in order for shale to be profitable, the price of oil per barrel had to be somewhere between $80 and $100. But even though it has fallen considerably, some shale supply is still taking place.
Okay.
So it's been very consistent. But it still costs more to produce shale oil than raw crude oil just from the ground. So it'll definitely act as sort of an upper cap to the amount of price that the OPEC and non-OPEC members can charge. But it's still going to be a lot higher than regular crude oil.
Now, if OPEC does fail to reach an agreement again on Wednesday during its key meeting, then what would happen to oil prices?
Okay, well, some analysts are saying that it might go down to $10 a barrel.
$10 a barrel?
But I find that very unlikely because the last time it fell below $10 per barrel was in the 1970s. And if you take account of inflation, $10 back then was a lot higher than $10 now.
Right.
The last time it came close to $10 adjusting for inflation was in the 1980s. Even in the 1990s, when typically the oil prices were thought to be low, it was trading around $40 per barrel, adjusting for inflation. So given that 90s was a boom time, even with the oil glut, I would expect the price to be slightly less than that, perhaps, but it won't fall too much below that. $10 a barrel, I think, is a very unlikely possibility because out of all the producers, only Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and perhaps some parts of the United States can afford to pump oil out at that price.
Now, the supply glut that you just talked about initially triggered a lot of concern about the deflation and also the impact that's going to have on Korean companies. But then it actually seems like performance hasn't been that bad.
Okay, well, it's been a bit surprising because, well, we had two oil crises in the 1970s, and both of the times it wasn't very good for Korean economy. economy. We had a very high oil price in the 2005 to 2013. Again, Korea didn't see that much of a good effect from high oil prices. So I don't know why people are insisting that higher oil prices will be good for Korea. But theoretically, if the increase in oil prices come from more demand, it signals that the global recovery will take place. So you need more oil to fuel the recovery. Then because the whole global economy is recovering, that may mean good news for Korean exports and Korean economy as a whole. But if what we're talking about here is trying to raise prices through limiting supply, and well, if the oil-producing countries do well, then Korea may export more to those countries.
Right.
But overall, I don't see that much good news for Korea.
Now, depending on the outcome of Wednesday's OPEC meeting, what's your outlook on oil prices and also the impact on global economies?
Okay, well, if you look at the oil price fluctuation before the unusually high oil prices in the 2005 to 2013, it traded around about $60 per barrel, except the 1990s when it was around $40 a barrel.
Okay.
So because we have a glut and because we have a global recession, I expect the oil prices go maybe slightly below that, maybe within about around $30 per barrel, between 30 and 40, but I don't really see it going that much lower as a long-term proposition.
Okay.
Perhaps there's a shock which drives the prices lower for a limited amount of time, but I think $30 to $40, it's about where it'll end up.
All right, we'll definitely keep our eyes on the Wednesday's meeting for now. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you.
And that wraps it up for today. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with more at the same time, same place for your business daily. Until then, goodbye.